Hello and welcome to Tech Deals, Intel i5 CPU performance comparison. Today we are testing three different i5 CPUs from three different generations. The i5-2400 Sandy Bridge processor, the i5-4440 Haswell processor, and the i5-6400 Skylake processor. All three CPUs are running at 3.1 GHz. Each machine also has the same graphics card and the same amount of system RAM. Installed in each machine is EVGA's GeForce GTX 1050 Ti Superclock graphics card, a wonderful graphics card that I have previously reviewed. Link in the video description below to that review if you would like to see it. Each of the machines has 16 gigs of RAM. The only difference is clock speed because each platform runs on a different speed of RAM. The i5-2400 has 16 gigs of DDR3 1333 MHz RAM. The i5-4440 is running 16 gigs of DDR3 1600 MHz RAM, and the i5-6400 is running 16 gigabytes of DDR4 2133 MHz RAM. Otherwise, the machines are exactly the same. Each is running off a solid-state drive, and each, as I said, is clocked at 3.1 GHz. We are playing today at 1080p Full HD resolution. Ultra Detail preset is used, anti-aliasing is on, and VSync is turned off. Fraps was used for the minimum, maximum, and average performance numbers you will see at the end of this video, but it was not used to record the video that you're watching. Instead, an external HD60 Pro hardware capture card was used, recorded on another computer. There is zero performance loss for the fact that I recorded this gameplay. The computer doesn't even know it was being recorded. The numbers in green at the top left corner of the screen are from Msi Afterburner, a free program that you can download from MSI.com to get real-time information on what your computer, your CPU, your RAM, your graphics card, etc. are doing in real time. I have done a video on how to set that up. Link in the video description below to go check that out. Now, I recorded over 1 hour of gameplay here between the three different cards. Don't worry, I'm not going to show you all hour and 15 minutes that I recorded because, frankly, it would get boring at some point. The entire point is to show you representative samples of the gameplay from each of the three different runs on the three different machines. We are currently watching the i5-2400 based machine. Take a look at the Msi Afterburner numbers at the top left corner of the screen. The first line is our graphics chip, the 1050 Ti. The 99 or 100% number there means we're using all of the compute power of the graphics card. Now, why did I select a 1050 Ti? Great question. The 1050 Ti was selected because it is the most powerful graphics card you can currently buy, at least in January 2017 when I recorded this, that does not require a 6-pin PCI Express power connector and is compatible with most basic pre-built machines. You simply open the machine, insert the card, close it, install the drivers, you're done in 2 minutes. It's very easy. You could certainly use a more powerful graphics card, and I may rerun this test in the future on these same three machines once I've replaced the power supplies. The temperature of the card is a nice, reasonable 64 degrees Celsius. Reasonable for the card, not for us. That is well within normal temperatures for a graphics card. And then we can see it's running at a very nice, almost 1800 megahertz. I do wish to point out that that is well above the rated clock speed of this card. No, I have not manually overclocked it. These cards will boost themselves, overclock themselves if thermal and temperatures allow. Basically what this means is this card is running a good 15 to 20% above the shipped clock speeds of this card. It's one of the reasons why I like it so much. Take a look at the second line, 4 gigs of VRAM. Now this card has 4 gigabytes of VRAM and we're using about 3 gigabytes of it. Modern AAA games such as Battlefield 1 want about 3 gigabytes of RAM at 1080p at ultra detail in 2017. There are a few that want more than that, but most do not go over 3, so the 4 gigabytes is going to be good at least for a while yet. The third line, the i5-2400, well, that's our CPU. Now, when this reads 100%, what that means is the game is using all 4 of our cores. At the moment, it's using between 80 to 90%. There it's 80, there's 86. Battlefield 1 does use all 4 cores of a 4-core processor, and in fact it will use a little bit more if you have it. If you run this on an i7 processor, it will actually go into hyperthreading. Since we don't have an i7, it's using what it has. You can see the temperature of our CPU, also a very reasonable 63-64 degrees. This particular computer I'm playing on is a Dell Optiplex 790 MT tower. There's nothing fancy in it. I've previewed this on my channel before. These are amazing values, under $150 on eBay. There'll be a link in the video description below to my $250 gaming computer video that talks about how to put this machine together for about $250 and play games like Battlefield 1. Look at that, we're getting 55 frames per second on $250 for the computer. That's not bad. System memory usage. Now this is a test computer, not a personal machine. There is nothing running on this computer besides a clean copy of Windows 10, Battlefield 1, Msi Afterburner, and Fraps. As I said before, the video is being recorded on another machine. Take a look at our system RAM usage. Msi Afterburner and Fraps do not use a lot of RAM. This is all Battlefield 1. Will Battlefield 1 run with only 8 GB of RAM? Yes, it will, but it will not run as smoothly. Average frame rates will not be very different. 1 to 3 frames per second less, very minor average frame rate difference. What you will notice is the minimum frame rate really drops. The smoothness, the frame stutter really changes when you only have 8 GB of RAM in Battlefield 1. This game will use more than 8 gigs of RAM. The entire system is using 9.4 at the moment, and it's worth noting that memory allocation does not include the disk cache. Windows will buffer pieces of the game, pieces of Windows in available system RAM that is not being used, and it's not recorded here, to improve the overall smoothness of the machine. If you are running an i5-2400 and you have a hard drive instead of a solid state drive and only 8 gigs of RAM and you play Battlefield 1, you're going to have a lot of swapping to the hard drive. Now what exactly does that mean? What it means is that the computer will stutter and pause at moments because it has to load information from the hard drive to system RAM and then swap information in the system RAM back out to the hard drive, which is much, much slower. With 16 gigabytes of RAM, it doesn't have to do that, thus allowing the machine to use all of its capability. If you are playing games such as Battlefield 1 in 2017, you should have 16 gigabytes of RAM in your system, full stop, as far as I'm concerned. Especially when you consider that it costs less than $40 to go from 8 to 16 gigabytes. I highly, highly recommend that you do it if it's at all possible. Finally, the last line is our real-time frame rate. Now we are running in DirectX 11. Why 11 and not 12? Because Fraps doesn't support DirectX 12, and it's a very easy program to use to record frame rates. Now there are some games, Doom as an example, Hitman as another, that do show a performance difference between DirectX 11 and DirectX 12. Battlefield 1 does not. Having turned it on and off and played with it a bit, I honestly don't see much of a performance difference. Ouch, that had to hurt. Did you see me hit him right against the wall? Pain. Battlefield 1, in my experience, does not exhibit a large performance difference between DirectX 11 and DirectX 12, so I'm not worried about it. In the future, I am going to switch to something that will test DirectX 12, but for now, this works well enough. Now that's enough of the i5-2400. We're now going to transition to the i5-4440 CPU. Again, everything is the same, 16 gigs of RAM, GTX 1050 Ti video card, ultra detail preset, which I'm showing you right here. The only difference between these two machines is we went from a 2nd generation Sandy Bridge to a 4th generation Haswell processor. Both are running at 3.1 gigahertz, both have 4 cores, 4 threads. The only other difference is the DDR3 RAM speed. On the 2400 machine, it's running at 1333, and on this machine, it's running at 1600, which makes exactly 0 difference to gameplay. There was a small speed bump in DDR3 RAM speeds between 2nd and 4th gen. That's what the motherboards support, but it really doesn't make any difference whatsoever. In fact, the 6400 running on DDR4 2133 also doesn't make any difference whatsoever. Now, why am I showing you this gameplay instead of showing you a bunch of charts and results and showing you just the numbers and saying here they are? because I believe that the smoothness of gameplay, I believe the experience of playing is far more important than any given number. Some games at 60 frames per second might seem to play well, but don't really because they stutter and they're jittery. Other games might be down at 30 to 40 frames per second, but actually be very responsive and smooth. I want to report on how playable the game is, not just a number. I mean, the numbers are useful and informative as comparative values, but the reality is, does the game play? This is very, very smooth, very responsive. There's no input lag. When you press keys, when you move the mouse, the game responds very, very well. Now, my personal playing might not be that great. If you watch my gameplay here and go, man, you're terrible at this. Well, yes, I am. You know, I'm not a serious Battlefield 1 player. But in terms of being able to control the character, move, and have any issues with responsiveness, no, there's no issue whatsoever. It's completely playable. So you don't have to replace your machine and buy something brand new every year just to play brand new games such as Battlefield 1. Take a look at the numbers in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. First line, GPU, 100% usage, just like the other machine. Temperature, just like the other machine. Clock speed, just like the other machine. The 4 gigs of VRAM. Now, please note here, this was just a Msi Afterburner configuration. The clock speed of the RAM is first, the memory allocation is second. They have to be reordered in the MSI software. I missed it on this one, sorry. We're using 3 gigabytes of VRAM, just like in the other run. What about the CPU usage? Here we are, we're currently at 73, 74, 79%. Now I'm just running and there's no enemies around. Watch for other areas when there's more going on and you'll see that spike up a bit. Take a look at the temperature. The temperature on the Haswell chip is a little bit lower, but keep in mind you cannot directly compare that aspect because they're different machines. The i5-2400 is a Dell Optiplex business machine. This machine, this i5-4440, is an Acer Aspire consumer machine. They're both mini tower cases. They both look the same size. They're both the same basic physical size. But in terms of the cooler on the CPU, it's whatever Dell and Acer provided. I've not changed anything with these machines. These are both several $100 off-the-shelf basic mini tower machines with a $150 graphics card inserted. Main system RAM is a little bit less on the usage this time. Again, different map, different situation. We're at 7.2 gigabytes of main system RAM usage. It does vary depending upon the map and what you're doing. Now, this is a different computer, but this also has a fresh installation of Windows 10. It's also a test machine. All 3 of these machines are test machines. The Dell and this one have both been covered at previous points on my channel. The 6400 is the Acer Aspire T, which I have recently reviewed on my channel as well. Again, test machine, not a personal computer. There's nothing else running in the background. So this is just how much main system RAM is being used at this point in the game. We are again running at DirectX 11. Take a look at our frame rate. Now we're in a vehicle and the blacked out sections there does affect it a little bit. But as I said before, I filmed over an hour and the idea was to give enough total footage to average out those levels of discrepancies. You can see here as we're advancing towards the building, there's explosions, the frame rate's dropping. It's a little bit higher here, but overall it's pretty consistent. That's enough of the i5-4440. Why don't we take a look at the new Skylake processor? Here we are on the i5-6400. Again, same basic machine, just a different processor, same RAM, same graphics card. I'm showing you here that we're at ultra detail, vertical sync turned off. Now we are again on a different map, so it is not exactly 100% directly comparable. In fact, this map is the most challenging of all. The trees, the vegetation, the grass will hurt performance more so than the desert terrains on the first 2 maps. In an ideal world, everything would be exactly the same. The gameplay, the maps, what you're doing. It's very difficult to get a multiplayer online run to be exactly comparable. So we're going with this. However, watch the real-time frame rate in the upper left-hand corner of the screen. It's remarkably similar to the other 2 runs. This is the most challenging map, but it holds its own very well. Everything else is about the same. Our VRAM usage is 3 gigabytes. Our CPU usage is varying between 60 to 90%. Now the temperature of the CPU is noticeably lower. In fact, take a look at that. We're down to 50 degrees. Part of the reason for the lower CPU temperature, more modern processor. the Skylake, the 6th generation chip, is on a 14 nanometer production process, and it runs cooler than the 22 nanometer of Haswell or the 32 nanometer of Sandy Bridge. Main system RAM usage again is about the same, about 7.5 to 8 gigabytes of system RAM, and then you can see our real-time frame rate. Of course, it spikes up a bit when we come to the map right here, and then it drops down once we zoom in. Would this have been maybe 5 frames per second faster if it had been done on the desert maps? Yes. You could toss a few more frames per second on there if you wanted to, but overall, I found the experience to be directly comparable. I do want to address something that is bound to be brought up, and I briefly touched on this at the beginning of the video. I'm going to address it now in detail. Why not test on a high-powered graphics card to remove the GPU's performance limitation from the machine to get a true sense of the real power difference between these chips? There's absolutely an argument to be made for that, and many tech sites do that. If you go to places like Tom's Hardware and Anitech, and if they're testing processors, they throw the most powerful graphics card they can at it to remove the GPU as a performance limitation. Likewise, when they're testing graphics cards, they put them all in the most powerful CPU they can possibly get to remove CPU performance as a limitation to testing. From a purely scientific point of view, they're correct. From a purely which CPU or which GPU has the most power, they're correct. The problem is nobody, or at least nobody who has any sense at all, builds computers that way. For example, if I wanted to strictly demonstrate the true performance difference between these chips in Battlefield 1, I would have put a GTX 1080 into these three machines. That would have completely removed all graphics performance limitations and allowed these CPUs to run at their maximum capability. Here's the problem with doing so. No one, ever, anywhere should put a GTX 1080 into any of these, much less a 5-year-old $130 i5-2400 based machine. If you are, you're throwing a graphics card that your machine just can't use. It's a complete waste of money. So I understand the scientific point of view that says remove the limitation of the graphics card and give the CPUs all the room to breathe. My big problem with that is it creates a situation that should not exist in the real world. You should never, ever, ever install a GTX 1080 into any of these machines. Even a 1070 is a bit overkill. I can understand why some people might put a 1070 with an i5. However, in my opinion, the absolute most graphics card that any of these machines should get is either a GTX 1060 or an AMD RX 480. I might very well rerun this test in the future with those cards installed to see if it shows a larger difference. I simply didn't have time, and it would make this video quite long, so that might be a future video series that I do. But for now, I wanted to put in a graphics card that I think that most people will actually install on these machines. If you're going to go to eBay and buy a 5-year-old i5-2400 based machine for $120 to $130, stick some extra RAM in it, and put an inexpensive graphics card to get a $250 to $300 gaming machine, how well it performs with a GTX 1070 or GTX 1080 means absolutely nothing. Who cares? You're not going to be running in that configuration. Instead, this shows how the machines run with a GTX 1050 Ti, so please let me be absolutely clear. The results and conclusions in this video only reflect the use of a 1050 Ti or similar powered graphics card. I am not attempting to make any claims or any comparisons between these machines with a more powerful graphics card or some completely different configuration that's not being tested here. What this video is designed to show is if you put a $150 graphics card into these three machines, is there any real performance difference, at least in Battlefield 1? Okay, that's enough gameplay. Why don't we go answer the question? Let's take a look at the results. And here we are at the results. Short answer is it doesn't make a lick of difference. 57, 56, and 54 frames per second average respectively on the three different machines. The minimum was a little bit lower on the last map because of the grass and trees. That minimum would have been closer to the other two had it been a desert terrain. Beyond that, there is no appreciable performance difference between the four different processor generations, the second, fourth, and sixth generation, when you normalize the amount of system RAM and the clock speed when using a GTX 1050 Ti. Again, one more disclaimer. I make no representations for how well this would have worked on a 1060, 1070 RX 480. This is designed to show what a $150 GTX 1050 Ti needs to play Battlefield 1 at ultra detail. Any i5 processor from the past 5 years will do it just as well as any other i5 processor from the past 5 years. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you loved it. Remember to subscribe to my channel using the big huge red button directly below this video. Questions and comments in the comment section, and as always, check out my video description below. Many links down there. Links to the i5-6400 Acer Aspire T review, links to the $250 deal on the i5-2400, link to my GTX 1050 Ti review, links to Amazon and Newegg and eBay for everything I just described. If you like my channel, if you like my videos, if you found this useful, helpful, and informative, the video description and the links are where it's all at. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.